My name is Ethan Wilder. I'm 29 years old and the founder of Wilder Capital, a modest investment firm I built from the ground up. I live in Minneapolis, a city of sharp contrasts, towering glass buildings, rising above sprawling parks, vibrant neighborhoods shadowed by quiet lakes and dense forests. It's a place where beauty and hardship often live side by side, much like the family I was born into. My father, Gregory Wilder, is a man whose name commands respect across this city. He built his legal empire through sheer force of will and intellect, leading one of the most powerful law firms in the state. To the world, he is the definition of success, a man who holds court in boardrooms and wins battles in courtrooms. But to me, he is something different. He is a looming figure, a shadow I've always struggled to escape. Growing up in that shadow wasn't easy. My twin brother Nolan seemed to glide effortlessly through our father's expectations, earning praise with every step. I, on the other hand, was different. I was blunt, stubborn, and never skilled at playing the part my father wanted me to play. Yet it wasn't all darkness. Some of my clearest and most comforting memories come from the summers spent with Grandpa Harold. His cabin sat just beyond the city limits, nestled deep within the pines. With his rough hands and knowing smile, Grandpa Harold taught Nolan and me lessons no school could offer. He showed us how to read the language of the forest, the whisper of the wind, the tracks left by animals, the way the light filters through the trees at dawn. Those moments felt like the only time I could be truly myself. But as much as those woods were a refuge, the walls of my family home reminded me daily of what I lacked: approval, affection, and the kind of love that didn't come with conditions. And so the battle to find my place began, setting the stage for the challenges that lay ahead. From an early age, Nolan and I seemed to live in two different worlds, though we shared the same face. Nolan had a way of making everyone around him feel at ease. His smile came naturally, his words carefully chosen to charm and please. Our father admired that he admired Nolan's diplomacy, his ability to say exactly what was needed to win approval. Nolan became the golden son, the one who never questioned, who never pushed back. I was different. I spoke my mind, even if it made waves. I wasn't interested in playing games or pretending to be someone I wasn't. To our father, I was stubborn, difficult, sometimes a disappointment. To me, I was simply honest. That honesty, however, came with a cost. I often felt distant from the warmth Nolan received so easily. Family dinners were minefields where I walked on eggshells, never quite able to measure up. But it wasn't all bleak. Grandpa Harold was the one person who understood me completely. While Nolan preferred the comfort of his grandmother's chess games and quiet laughter, I sought refuge in the forest with Grandpa. He taught me more than how to identify trees or track animals. He taught me resilience. "Ethan," he said once, "being true to yourself isn't always easy, but it's the only way to live." His words became a compass during the most confusing times. My mother Diane loved both Nolan and me with fierce tenderness, but even she struggled to bridge the widening gap between father and son. Her smiles sometimes faltered when she caught the flicker of frustration or hurt in my eyes. I sensed her helplessness when the walls of our family closed in, and despite her efforts, I felt isolated. The house wasn't a place where I belonged. It was a stage where roles were assigned and I was never the leading man. The favor shown to Nolan and the distance I was kept at left an invisible mark, one I carried quietly. That split between us wasn't just about personality, it was about who our father saw as worthy. And it was a lesson I would carry with me into the future, one that would shape how I fought to find my own place in the world. From those early days of divided attention, the path ahead was already taking shape. When my father announced that Nolan and I were to attend a prestigious boarding school in Boston, it felt like a verdict, not an opportunity. Nolan accepted it with ease. his eyes bright with the promise of approval and success. I, however, felt the walls closing in tighter. I voiced my objection clearly. "I want to stay here," I said, "near Grandma and Grandpa, near Mom." My mother's eyes filled with quiet relief, and she quietly supported my plea. She understood the pull I felt toward the only places that made me feel whole. But my father's gaze hardened. "Ethan," he said, voice cold, "you need to learn to live in the real world. The forest and family won't build your future." His words were sharp, a reminder that my dreams and needs mattered less in his eyes. Nolan tried to smooth the growing tension. "Dad, it's a good chance for both of us. Ethan just needs time to adjust." His words sounded like a peace offering, but I knew where his loyalty truly lay. With my father not with me. That moment was a turning point. The distance between my father and me grew wider. I wasn't the son who fit into his plans. I was the one who resisted. I began to wonder if there was truly a place for me in this family, or if I was meant to be the outsider watching from the edges. Even with my mother's love and my grandparents' support, the question lingered, how much could I bend to their expectations without losing myself? The choice wasn't just about school, it was about the life I was willing to fight for. That decision set the stage for the paths Nolan and I would follow, each shaped by different hopes and expectations. Nolan and I both ended up at the University of Minnesota, a place where ambition filled every hallway and every classroom buzzed with possibility. I dove into economics, hungry to understand the forces that shaped the world my father ruled, hoping somehow to claim a piece of it for myself. From the start, the differences between Nolan and me were impossible to ignore. Nolan's life came with privileges that felt like a shield. He had a monthly allowance that covered everything from gas to dinners with friends. He drove a car our father bought for him, shiny and new, and he was introduced to influential people at dinners and business events. Those connections opened doors before Nolan even had a chance to knock. I, on the other hand, had tuition covered, but nothing more. No car, no allowance, no introductions to powerful figures. If I wanted to eat, pay rent, or buy books, I had to earn it myself. I took a part-time job at the university library shelving books and helping students find materials. It wasn't glamorous, and the paycheck barely stretched, but it was mine, and I refused to ask for anything else. With the little savings I could scrape together, I opened a small investment account online. I spent nights reading financial reports and analyzing trends, learning on my own terms. Every dollar I earned was a small victory, a quiet rebellion against a system that didn't seem to want me to succeed. Meanwhile, Nolan launched a startup with our father's capital backing him. The legal firm handled the paperwork, smoothing every hurdle. Nolan's charm and our father's money made the road seem effortless. It was hard not to compare, to feel that sting of bitterness creeping in whenever I heard about the next deal Nolan closed or the praise he received. But bitterness wasn't enough to stop me. If anything, it fueled a determination to prove I could build something of my own without shortcuts or favors. I didn't want handouts. I wanted to earn respect on my own terms. Each day, I reminded myself that success wasn't about what you were given, but what you made of it. The battle was invisible, fought in quiet offices and late nights alone, but it was mine to win or lose. Those university years shaped me more than any lesson from the classroom. They forged a resolve that no family divide could break. The choices Nolan and I made then would echo far beyond those college walls, setting the course for what was to come. Graduation day arrived with all the pomp and ceremony expected of such an occasion. The auditorium buzzed with excitement and proud families, but beneath the smiles, the tension between Nolan and me was impossible to ignore. Our father's eyes shone as he praised Nolan in his speech, promising $1 million investment to launch his startup. The applause was thunderous, and Nolan's smile was bright, full of hope and confidence. I watched from the sidelines, the weight of years of struggle pressing down on me. When it was my turn, my father's words were sparse and cold. "Ethan," he said quietly but firmly, "you'll have to earn your own way. No promises, no handouts, just the clear message that I was expected to succeed without his support." I forced a smile, but inside a storm raged. The gap between us, once a quiet tension, was now a chasm. I realized that this was the moment I had been preparing for, the moment I had to step out of his shadow and claim my own path, no matter how uncertain. That evening, I packed my few belongings into an old suitcase. The decision to move out wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Home no longer felt like a place of belonging. It was a reminder of what I lacked. My mother hugged me tightly before I left, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "You're stronger than you know, Ethan," she whispered. Her love was the only warmth I felt that night, a fragile light against the cold distance that had settled between my father and me. When I said goodbye to my father, there were no words, only a nod and a look that held everything unsaid. The silence between us was heavier than any argument. Walking away from the house, I felt the weight of the past settle behind me. The future was uncertain, but for the first time it was mine to shape. That step toward independence would define the battles to come and the man I was determined to become. Moving into my cramped apartment in downtown Minneapolis was a jolt, a far cry from the spacious rooms and polished floors I'd left behind. Every dollar counted, and I learned quickly to live frugally. Instant noodles replaced meals, and second-hand clothes became my wardrobe. The job market was brutal. Firms dismissed me with polite rejections, citing lack of experience or connections I refused to ask for. Finally, a small investment company took a chance on me. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. Days blurred into long hours of data entry, financial modeling, and learning the rhythms of the market. Evenings were spent poring over books and reports, investing small amounts of my savings into stocks I researched obsessively. Losses came with the territory, each one a painful lesson, but I refused to quit. I reminded myself that every failure was a step closer to mastery. Contact with my family became scarce. My mother called regularly, her voice a steady source of encouragement. She never judged or pressured me, just listened and believed. My father's calls were rare and distant, often laced with disappointment I could feel through the phone. Nolan's success was harder to ignore. His name appeared in headlines, his startup growing rapidly with the help of our father's resources. The gap between us seemed to widen every day. Amidst the grind, Grandpa Harold's words echoed in my mind. "Money isn't just about wealth. Ethan," he'd said once, "it's about legacy, what you leave behind and who you become in the process." Those cryptic lessons were my anchor when doubt crept in. The journey was exhausting, but I clung to the belief that persistence would pay off. Nolan's rise might have been easier, but my path, though harder, was mine to walk. And with every quiet victory, I moved closer to the future I was determined to build. Grandpa Harold's health took a sharp turn. His once steady steps slowed, and his voice, though still warm, grew faint. I found myself visiting more often, sitting beside him as the world outside rushed by. He never complained, but I could see the weight of years in his eyes. When he passed, the house felt emptier than ever. The funeral was quiet, but beneath the surface, tension simmered. Family members exchanged polite words, but the unspoken strains were impossible to ignore. Nolan kept his distance. My mother tried to hold us all together, and my father seemed lost in thought, his expression unreadable. The day of the will reading was charged with anticipation. We gathered in a small office, the air thick with expectation. When the lawyer began, the shock was immediate. Grandpa had left his entire $5 million investment portfolio to me, nothing for anyone else. A letter followed, handwritten and full of quiet strength. He spoke of trust, of seeing the honesty and resilience in me that others overlooked. He urged me to use the legacy not just for wealth, but to build something meaningful, to honor the values he had lived by. My father's reaction was fierce and immediate. Anger cracked his voice as he accused me of undeserved favoritism. "I am his son," he said, voice low and bitter. "I deserve a share of that." Nolan remained silent, but I caught the tightness in his jaw. Through it all, my mother squeezed my hand, a silent shield against the storm. I felt the weight of the legacy pressing down, not just the money, but the expectations, the trust, the responsibility. In that moment, I understood that inheritance was more than assets. It was the belief someone placed in you when no one else would. Carrying that meant carrying their hopes, their values, and the challenge to live up to them. And as the family fractured around me, I knew the real test was just beginning. After the will reading, I spent hours studying my grandfather's portfolio. Each stock bond and fund was a piece of the legacy he entrusted to me. I was determined not just to preserve it, but to grow it, to prove that his faith was not misplaced. With that conviction, I founded Wilder Capital, a small investment fund named in his honor. The early days were rough. I faced skepticism from potential investors who questioned my youth and lack of experience. Doors closed quietly but firmly. Still, I pushed forward, driven by something deeper than money, a responsibility to the values Grandpa had taught me: honesty, courage, and resilience. Meanwhile, Nolan's startup, once glowing with promise, began to show cracks. Rumors of internal struggles and missed targets reached me, a reminder that not every success was built on solid ground, but I kept my focus. I knew my path wouldn't be easy, but it was mine. In the quiet moments, I thought back to Grandpa's words: "Courage isn't the absence of fear, Ethan. It's choosing to move forward despite it." Those lessons became my guide as I faced each new challenge. Building Wilder Capital was more than a business venture. It was a way to honor a legacy that meant more than wealth. It was about forging my own definition of success, one that wasn't handed to me, but earned with grit and integrity. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time I felt ready to meet it head-on. What came next would test not just my skills, but the strength of everything I stood for. Over the next 4 years, Wilder Capital grew steadily, reaching $30 million through careful, ethical investments. Each success was a quiet victory, proof that I could build something lasting without shortcuts or favors. The media began to take notice, and investors who once doubted me started to listen. I learned to protect my focus by keeping distance from family drama. I avoided the toxic conversations and comparisons that seemed to follow me, especially from my father. His subtle jabs, the way he praised Nolan in passing, reminded me that some wounds never fully heal. Yet my mother's steady support was a balm. Her calls, her quiet encouragement grounded me when the pressure threatened to overwhelm. Behind the public success, I heard whispers of Nolan's struggles. His startup faced challenges he kept hidden away from the praise and spotlight. It was a reminder that appearances often mask reality and that success can be fragile. As my responsibilities grew, so did the weight of the legacy I carried. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about staying true to the values Grandpa had passed down, about proving that integrity could survive in a world that often rewarded anything but. Balancing growth and personal strength wasn't easy. Sacrifices had to be made, relationships put on hold, moments missed. But I knew that to protect what I'd built, I needed to be relentless. The years of hard work had brought me far, but the true test was yet to come. The choices I would face next would challenge everything I'd learned about family loyalty and what it meant to truly succeed. The news came suddenly: Nolan's startup was in trouble. A major investor had pulled out, leaving a gaping hole in their funding. My mother's voice trembled as she told me over the phone, and I could hear the worry behind her words. A few days later, my father called. His tone was different, urgent, almost pleading. He wanted me to bail Nolan out, to step in with money and save the company his son had built with our family's support. I knew what was expected, but I refused. I told my father I wouldn't give Nolan direct funding. Instead, I offered to connect Nolan with financial advisors who could help restructure the company. It was support, but not a handout, and it was the only way I could stay true to myself. The confrontation that followed was intense. My father accused me of selfishness, of abandoning family when it mattered most. I stood firm. I told him I would not repeat his mistakes, that fairness didn't mean giving more to some while ignoring the hard work of others. Nolan looked at me with a mix of gratitude and hurt, caught between his brother and his father. The fractures in our family deepened, cracks too wide to mend with words. That moment marked a turning point. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was about who I was and what I stood for. I chose independence over obligation, integrity over convenience. As the distance between us grew, I realized that sometimes saying no to those you love is the hardest and the most necessary choice you can make. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face whatever came next. I stood at my grandfather's grave, the cold wind carrying memories of every lesson he ever taught me. His legacy wasn't just the portfolio or the money, it was the strength to stand alone, the honesty to face the truth, and the courage to stay true to myself. This journey has shaped who I am far beyond the numbers and success. It's a responsibility I carry with quiet pride, knowing that legacy is more than wealth. It's the values we pass on and the person we become along the way. To anyone listening, I say this: embrace your true self, even when the path is hard. There's power in authenticity and freedom in owning your story. As I turned away, I felt ready for whatever challenges lie ahead, grounded in the knowledge that I walk the path my grandfather believed I could. The future is uncertain, but I am no longer afraid to face it.